Now for a departure from our usual high fantasy and comic book fare, we're going into classic literature with the origins of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Welcome back to They Call Me Uncle. The world's most famous detective was introduced in 1887 in Beaton's Christmas Annual magazine. A study in Scarlet provides Holmes' first adventure, as well as his meet cute with Dr. John Watson.
He's mine. Oh. It's an old friend of mine, John Watson.
The story itself is told by Watson.
My name is Dr. John Watson.
A military surgeon just returned home from Afghanistan.
I had served and been wounded in the more remote regions of Afghanistan. The sight of London again was already working its soothing tonic.
He runs into his old pal Stanford, who in turn introduces him to the eccentric detective Holmes. Holmes flaunts his skills at deduction by telling Watson exactly who he is and where he's been.
How did you know I just got back from Afghanistan?
Well, it's obvious. You're a doctor, that much we know. But with the air of a military man.
So trained at Bart, so army doctor.
You've acquired a sunburn. I know it's not your natural color because your wrists are white.
But no tan above the wrists. You've been abroad but not sunbathing.
You use your left arm stiffly as though you've sustained a wound.
Wounded in action then. Wounded in action, suntan, Afghanistan or Iraq.
Instead of being immensely creeped out by this, Watson moves in with Holmes at 221B Baker Street. Over time, Watson gets more and more involved in Holmes' work as a detective, eventually becoming his unofficial and later totally official partner.
Found your website, The Science of Deduction. You said you could identify a software designer by his tie and an airline pilot by his left thumb?
Yes.
It's by a person's fingernails, his coat sleeves, boots. Oh, come now. I wrote that article myself.
One day, the policeman Gregson in the Straight asks Holmes to consult on a fresh murder case, and Watson gets to tag along. The victim is the American Enoch J. Drebber, with the word Rache written in blood on the wall, which is German for revenge. Holmes quickly deduces that Drebber died of poisoning and finds a ring near the body. He explains how he reached this conclusion thanks to some insights provided by the beat cop Rance. Holmes sets a trap using a missing property ad in the paper, and the old woman who comes to collect is actually a young man named Sawyer.
Ain't no woman, it's a man.
Who eludes Holmes in a foot chase. Luckily, like any good detective or human being, really, Holmes has a group of trained street urchins who keep him posted, led by Wiggins. Meanwhile, Gregson tells the pair that the police have a suspect in the killing of Drebber, Arthur Charpentier. Madame Charpentier and her daughter Alice had recently met the deceased Drebber, who made a pass at Alice and struck out hard. But then Lestrade arrives with news that his prime suspect, Stangerson, has also just been murdered, with Rache appearing in blood next to him as well. It's fun to say.
Rache, German for revenge. She could be trying to tell us
Yes,
something.
thank you for your input.
Through some pills found on the windowsill, Holmes announces that he's straight up solved the case. Apparently one of the pills was poisonous and the other was not. He then summons a cabbie, then detains the cabbie. While this seems completely crazy at first, Holmes reveals the cabbie is Jefferson Hope, the killer of both Drebber and Stangerson. That's part one. Part two is where the story gets a bit strange. It's the dramatic reveal that takes up most of the frickin' book. And most of all because it contains a rather palpable hatred for Mormons.
Well, who was right? Who gets into heaven?
I'm afraid it was the Mormons. Yes, the Mormons were the correct answer.
We at TCMU mostly live in Utah, so we can talk about them. Anyway, in the American West, a man named John Ferrier and a young child are taken in by a group of Mormon pioneers, including Brigham Young himself. You know, the two castaways make a life for themselves in Salt Lake City, where John becomes very wealthy and the girl Lucy becomes very pretty. Lucy meets the future killer Jefferson Hope when he saves her life, and the two quickly fall in love. John, however, is told that Lucy must marry one of the two prearranged local boys, whose fathers happen to be Drebber and Stangerson. Ominous numbers count down the days until Lucy has to make her decision. Ferrier, Lucy, and Hope escape Utah, but Ferrier is killed by Stangerson.
No! Joe Stangerson did that!
Lucy is dragged back to marry Drebber, but dies of sadness within a month.
Thank you. Not a race, guys!
Over the next 20 years, a vengeful Hope tails the two villains to Cleveland, of all places, where they have him arrested, the report of which is how Holmes would later learn Hope's name. Hope then follows the pair all across Europe before finally finding them again in England. In the spirit of fairness, he offers the men a poison pill and a placebo. Letting God sort them out kind of deal.
Let the high God choose between us.
One chose wrong, and the other chose a knife to the chest. The action then returns to the present. Holmes and Watson have solved the case. That would have wrapped itself up anyway when Hope dies of a very plot-convenient heart ailment the night of his arrest. And now for our countdown. Coming in at 7 with only 7 points out of 63 is more of a nod to Study in Scarlet than an adaptation of it. Elementary Season 4, Episode 13, A Study in Charlotte. Get it? Charlotte, not Scarlet. It's different. Anyway, it has Johnny Lee Miller as Sherlock, Gregson, somebody dying of poison, and the word Rache shows up in tattoo form this time.
The word is Rache, which means revenge. Defense, he invoked his membership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They view tattooing as a defilement of the body temple.
It is, however, the only one on the list that actually shows a Mormon, and doesn't make them cartoonishly evil either. So good on them. Not much else, though. Coming in at number 6 is Sherlock Holmes and A Study in Scarlet from 1933, with 10 points. Allegedly, they only licensed the title and not the actual story, so you do get Holmes and some of the same characters, but very little else to do with the plot. Number 5 is the very first episode of 1954's Sherlock Holmes, The Case of the Cunningham Heritage. This pulls in 16 points by doing Holmes and Watson's origins pretty much down pat. At 4th place with 23 points, but Morgan's personal favorite of the bunch, is Sherlock, A Study in Pink. It famously updates Holmes to the present day and does include fragments of the short story. And we wouldn't trade Benedict Cumberbatch's take on Holmes for anything.
The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street. Afternoon.
3rd with 39 points is the lesser-known Russian version, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, The Bloody Inscription. While skipping Holmes and Watson meeting, it gets pretty darn close to the nitty-gritty of the book. It and Elementary are indeed the only ones that actually mention the Mormons, this one apparently sharing Doyle's dim view of them. Number 2 with 46 points is the 60s TV series, Sherlock Holmes, Season 2, Episode 3, starring TCMU favorite Peter Cushing as Sherlock Holmes. Like the Russians, it skips Holmes meeting Watson, but gets almost the whole rest of the story spot on. Surprisingly, number 1 is an animated movie, beating out Peter Cushing by 1 point at 47. Replaces the Mormonism with a slightly tamer Western vibe, but delivers Doyle's story as true as any. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.
But It's cold outside.